I'm Greg Stach. I'm the owner of Muriel and I. Lewis and Clark Lake Vineyard. We've been around for a long time. We came to Yankton in 1979 and moved out here in 1985. And the next year we planted a whole nursery full of grafted apples and 2 rows of Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Chardonnay. I thought we could lay them down just to try, so it's like a couple hundred, or probably 100 vines total. And of course, that's first, life is nothing but a learning curve, right? So that didn't work out, although we did persevere for a number of years. But we found out the reason why you can't grow them around here is we don't have growing degree days at all. And so they would, and like Cynthiana is the one that's grown a lot in the Missouri and that place. The reason why is they get growing units. And so tune into your growing degree days wherever you live. Now I would like to just have started over here where you're from, and do you have a farm or do you have grapes or?
Yeah, Glen Personal Organics by Vermilion. We do have a few vines we're testing in our high tunnel.
Good. Okay.
Andy Gunther, Spencer, South Dakota. We just recently moved out here and looking to put in a vineyard, but
Okay.
I did grew for Welch's for about 8 years in New York.
Okay. Awesome. Well, you've got some experience. Good for you.
Sue Grant, I have about 100 acres over here, and basically concentrating on native grasses.
Good for you. We need more of that. I grew up on pasture with that. It's wonderful.
I'm Kelly Sheets, and this is my husband Sam. We own Sheets Mercantile up south of Mount Vernon, South Dakota.
Oh,
And we have a dairy farm, and we have a few grapes as well.
I grew up on a dairy farm, so I'm glad you could break away.
Yeah.
Been up since 4.
5, yeah.
Rand?
Rand and Vanessa Wergen, we've got a small hobby plot of about 400 vines near Burbank, South Dakota.
I'm Patrick Clune, this is my mother Anita, and we're from Sioux Falls, and I'm learning.
Well, guess what? I've been doing this a long time. I'm still learning too. So, and then Angela is here also, and Morgan with South Dakota Spa. So my wife is at the gate and she'll be by. Don't give her the mic, okay? So I wanted the general agenda is a lot to cover, so we'll just keep moving along. I wanted to tell a little bit of history about our vines. Here are some of the instrumentation and equipment that I use for grape harvest and how we work with the winery. Here are some examples of what happens when you have dicamba damage. And here's some of the tools I use, including a scythe. I use that more than you think around vines. Is either that or get down on your hands and knees, and I'm just getting too old for that anymore. But then also I have how you make extract. I have a 500-gallon compost tea brewer down there that's only about 4 or 5 years old, probably 6 now. But I found that you have to have a microscope, and I have one, and I know how to use it. And you never know if it's going to be 36 hours or 48 hours for your batch to get done enough so that you've proliferated all the biology you need. And worst of all, I found out if you start out with crap compost, you're going to come up with crap compost tea. And so I've worked on that a lot, and that's something I hope that you all do. I found out last year or two that compost extract is really a lot better if you have good compost to work with. So then I'm going to go over some of the stuff that I use. And this is a good backup, this heat mat, for when you're propagating plants and flats. But I find that you have to, in Korean natural farming, you have to make almost all your own ingredients. You just can't buy this stuff at any price unless you want to ship it from Hawaii. And I find that biology really grows well when it's 70 to 80 degrees. And even around here, if you wait for the diurnal temperature difference of 30 or 40 degrees, that's too much for biology, and it actually stops. I have some IMO3, which is indigenous microorganisms. That's the very basis of Korean natural farming. You harvest your own microbes in your own place. I don't care if you live in a city lot, but get something nearby And I have some examples over here, and I'll be going through that. Then here are some of the products that I use, and some literature, and I'll go over the plant sap analysis that I have for some of the grapes this year as a way of just showing you what I do and how I do it, and you try not to work too blindly. So what I ask is everybody, please ask questions. There aren't any dumb questions. I might give you a dumb answer or inadequate. Any way you slice it, please ask questions, because that's how we all learn. So here's the instrumentation. We sell our grapes at Prairie Berry Winery, and their wholesale grape production is difficult. If you're going to plant some vines and you got 50 of this and 100 of that, good luck trying to sell it to a winery. Their presses and their stemming equipment is 10 times bigger than anything you ever imagined, and you're going to have a hard time selling to them. In fact, you're going to have a hard time getting a commitment from them that they're even going to buy the grapes. But for damn sure, at least ask them what varieties they would like to vent if they were to buy them. And I don't know that you're going to get a commitment from wineries, but at least ask what variety and plant one of them. If you want to know what Verona or a dozen other grapevines take, buy 10 of them. 10 of this, 10 of that. Just dedicate one row. I have 2 rows in all of these grapes here. They're dedicated just for test varieties. I have, we call it St. Catherine's because the girl that picked it discovered it in the vineyard. It's they're a bronze colored beautiful grape, the Frontenac Gris, and here's one grapevine clusters that big on it. They're yellow. And so that's an anomaly. I marked it with a ribbon. I'm going to propagate that and put it in my test rows, maybe 10 of them. And see, you're looking for, I don't do wine, I don't make wine. We make some juice for our own personal consumption. But all of that is part of keeping your eyes open. I knew it was there. You can pick and throw in the bin anything you want for a winery because they'll crush and destem it. But it's nice to have that as part of what keeps you going, that spark that keeps you coming out in the vineyard every day. When we send them to a winery, I have to do an assay on the juice. So I go out and pick 100 berries, and one from each cluster of walking down 2 rows. And I'll have to do that 4 or 5 times before each harvest. We have Brianna here. Everything is at near senescence. It's been so dry. I usually water, but this is my first full production year with some grapes. And I wanted to prove what Korean natural farming is made of. You have to do some testing. You have to go cold turkey on some of this stuff. When I first started growing grapes in earnest in, say, the mid-90s, and then when the South Dakota Farm Winery Law passed in 1998, then we were approached, could you plant more grapes? And we'll buy everything you can plant. And so we did, and we wound up with all of that, and about half of this was just grapes and Brianna, and there's a big learning curve, as you would know. Really the biggest one is get the right varieties, one the winery will buy, and then learn how to prune. And that's surprisingly, there's a learning curve there more than you know. And if you don't do it right, you're going to get grapevine trunk disease. It's not because you're a poor grower, it's just your pruning practices need a little bit of shaping up. I'm not going to cover much of that today because that's a separate subject altogether. But you can go from there and get your first production. The winery is going to know what is my Brix, pH, and TA, titratable acids. So I have a thing from Vinmetrica, but really all you need is a pH meter because you can get some 100 berries, crush them up, get some juice out of that, get your Brix. This is a refractometer, and probably so many of you have seen this before. You pull the lid back, this is a prism in here, you put a few drops on there, close it down, and you look and you see a number. And you record that number, keep your record straight. Then you have pH, and this will read the pH of your liquid. And then I have a 0.1 mole solution of sodium hydroxide. It's lye, but it's reduced in strength to 0.1 mole instead of full strength. And that you have to put in your grape mousse, and there's a little formula for it. And all amounts to is you're looking for how many drops, how many milliliters of 0.1 mole sodium hydroxide does it take to raise the pH, where it starts out at about 3.2, let's say 3.15. How many drops it take to raise it to 8.2 pH? That's your stop point. There's a you multiply that out, you put in the formula how much strength sodium hydroxide you're using, and you divide it by the total. I used to put water in mine, but I don't do that anymore. I use straight juice, and this works out just fine. So you report these. Estimated tonnage, you have to, that's a tricky one. I still have a hard time with that. Closest I've ever gotten is about 500 pounds. Sometimes I'm off 2,000 pounds. And I don't just look at something and say, yeah, I think we got about 10,000 pounds there. I have to walk the rows, pick some vines, say, okay, in this vine I'm going to have 15 pounds because you weigh a cluster. And then I'll find one that's a little bit weaker. Okay, there's 10 pounds here. And you just go through. Then you drive the whole thing on my tractor there, that little one, and you count up, is it weak or strong? And then I say, I don't have to count clusters every time. I say, okay, it's weak, it's got 10 pounds. And you come out reasonably well some years, and some years you're way off, and I have no idea. So that's pretty much basic equipment. This is a plant sap press vise that works on every kind of plant except grapes. It's very difficult. You only need 2 or 3 drops of juice and you can stuff these things through. Down there is a juicer. That works. It's meant for juicing, and I'll go over that later. This is an anvil pruner as opposed to a bypass pruner. It is for hand fatigue. You can pass that around, take a look at it, very sharp. I never liked that concept, but it is got such a thin kerf. It's made in Germany. It's a Lowe, or Lowell as we would say in America. But it cuts through this vine. The fatigue factor at the end of the day of pruning is just unbelievably different than a bypass pruner that most of you probably have. Lowe pruner, or anybody with a good anvil pruner, that is a wonderful device right there. So I would highly recommend you consider that in the future. We got hit. Okay, any questions about anything we've talked about so far? I also use this. It's a penetrometer, and I use it to stick it in the ground to see how much resistance there is to penetration. And there's a dial on here. You can pass that around, and you can see that it shows you got a 200 green line and 300 psi. And if you're more than 300 psi, it means you haven't got very good filtration in your soil, no aeration, and you're going to have these 1-inch rains. You get a lot of runoff. And I've talked to people who do routine tests on cornfields that have been in the usual chemical Roundup usage for a long time. They said they're lucky to get 2 inches in the soil before they max out on their gauge. And it's a crime, because you get a 1-inch rain and you're going to have flooding in the low spots because it doesn't soak in. I also use, I won't pass this around, but I use this thing. I have a weed whacker, but I have a lot of irrigation, and it's just difficult. Hi, Fred. Wow, how you doing? Pull up a chair. Up front, you got to sit up front when you came in.
Yeah, late people have to come up front. That's how it works.
So this is very sharp, and it has a special method of working, but it is really amazing around vines and things how you can get in there and pick out a special this or that, all the weeds you're after, grasses mostly. So it works out very well. We've been growing for a long time. We had regular production every year, and we have a semi that backs the truck up here, a refrigerator reefer 60-footer. And we'll load in our bins. The picking bins are down there, some of them. And so in 2018, we had our first hit of dicamba. Any of the young vines pretty much died right back to the ground. In fact, that year they just outright died. And the older vines had leaf curl, yellowing on the margins, and I thought, what the hell do I do? You know, because I've been, by that point, I was just using compost tea and organic inputs. I've been sort of organic for, I don't know, since 2010 at least. And I relied on compost tea and got a lot smarter at that. But the problem is, I sent the leaves into a lab and they couldn't find what the problem was. And I had no idea that dicamba was loose on the world or what it was, but that was the first symptom. However, the most relevant fact for us was that whole block behind you, that was all Frontenac Gris. And that was about the first week in August when the leaves started yellowing. They curl up like that on themselves, and within 1 week there was no leaf left on the vines. Row after row, canes everywhere, and all you saw were green canes, beautiful clusters, no leaves. So before I lost all the leaves, I got enough samples to send away. I couldn't find anything. Well, it turns out dicamba damage, there's only just 2 labs in the United States as of last year that could actually identify dicamba damage on leaves. And I don't know why, because it's been prevalent. I do know this, there are a lot of vineyards and private growers who are trying to grow non-GMO soybeans, can't do it anymore. And I know the state ag department, when I finally, okay, we got hit in 2018, got hit again in 2019, and where this stuff comes from, I don't have any idea. It just floats adrift. In 2017, we were at a winery and vineyard up near Volga, South Dakota, up by Brookings. And we drove up to their place just like you would, and here's this nice little short vineyard, and then right literally across the fence row, 60 acres of beans that were dead, and they were that tall. What's going on here? Well, we got hit by dicamba. What's dicamba? Well, it turned out the neighbor had hired the co-op to spray his field. He had a 4-acre field of soybeans, whatever day that was. Everything was just fine. It was a nice calm day. The winds were from just about like today. They came out and sprayed it. It was the first year I think that was actually available. And then the next day, we had one of the southern breezes of 40 mile an hour, and it was like 95 degrees, you know, one of those blowtorch days that we get. And it volatilizes, goes up in the air, hits an inversion zone, then goes with the wind. It becomes a gas. And it drifted on that vineyard, and he didn't lose his vines, but then we didn't lose too much except for La Crescent, which was apparently very, very hit hard. We lost the crop that year, but their vines did okay the next year, but that was the only hit they got. They settled that. The farmer who's had his land sprayed said that he was going to pay for the loss of that 60-acre soybeans, except his insurance company wouldn't do it. So the farmer who lost soybeans had to sue that farmer. That farmer sued the co-op because the co-op put her down. The co-op said, blame me for nothing. I followed exactly the instructions on the label. And so if it did this, then I called them. So then we got hit again in 2021. 2018, 2019 got worse. Then it got more leaf curl. 2021 we got hit again. And actually it wasn't even the worst of the symptoms. We didn't have any. In 2019, by the way, we lost 1,500 vines of another variety over here. Just outright died. This is what happens. In the wintertime, if the vine isn't dead, the vine apparently loses its ability through the xylem and the phloem to send its nutrients back down to the ground. The water has to drain out, and the trunk split. And you can pass this around. This is about this height to the ground.
And could I verify, you said Frontenac Grease, and then you said La Crescent. So which
La
one?
Crescent was the first one that actually outright died. And then, and here's some more at various.
So we had this in 2021, but we thought it was because it warmed like normal, but then we had like a 36-hour freeze that was really cold.
Well, see, but the vine, depending on the time of year, the vines are dormant. The vines that you have,
Ours weren't though; they had been flowing.
We
The
have
xylem, and I figured it just swelled up in there and split because of the xylem and the phloem freezing.
what time of year was it?
I'll have to go back and check my records, but it was April.
Yeah. Oh, they could be coming out of dormancy by
It,
then.
yeah, it was late. I hate saying we had early warming, but we definitely, or even a late frost, but it was a hard frost, like in the 20s for like 36 hours.
There, those vines are, unless you had bud swell, those vines are still dormant to that temperature. You're good.
I don't think we had that frost.
Yeah, you're okay.
Okay.
They're quite good. In fact, is that I mentioned this Tom Plucker. He's got a whole breeding regimen based on trying to reduce the incidence of things you're just talking about. So what he's got, we've got some over here, Crimson Pearl and a few Petite Pearl. He's got, so they go into hardiness, they harden off soon, they lignify the canes in July already, after equinox. They go into dormancy early, they stay in the deep dormancy longer, and they're about a week later on bud swell than almost all these others. Frontenac Gris, Frontenac, Brianna, all bred in either Elmer Swenson had his hand in it, that farmer in Wisconsin. He bred Brianna, and he had quite a vineyard. And then most of these were University of Minnesota released. And this Tom Plucker is a private breeder, and they're like 75 cents or $1 royalty per vine.
Yep.
So
That's right.
vines used to cost us, when we first started, about $1.25. Now they're $6. That's about what a fruit tree used to cost, and now they're $40. So it's really bad. If you want to propagate things, then this mat for wintertime in a garage or just trying to keep things constant, when you go into natural farming, you're going to find out you have to become a fermenter. That barrel over there, we'll go into that later. That and two others like that, I harvested with a lawnmower, the bagger catcher. In the spring, I harvested dandelions. They were in full bloom flower and some of the green sticking up. I set it up high, and I collected 3 bins full. I packed them full, then put water in it and a little bit of lactic acid bacteria, sealed it off, and there's some excess catch there for CO2. And I thought, well, I've never tried this before, but that's natural farming, so do it. And I'll open it up. There's a little bit of smell to it, but it's natural fertilizer. And I've got like 150, 175 gallons of it. And I'm going to use it in compost and put it through my drip. What I've found, because I didn't water until just recently, most of the young vines are still in some state of living, but anything that bore crop is senescing already. It's not unusual. We've had a lot of years where we had frost by this time of year, and it's really disappointing because you love to get all the photosynthesis as you can, because that's what keeps you. That's the whole key to this whole thing, is have plants in the ground to feed the microbes, and they will feed you back, and you have plant health. I got some very important information talking about the plant sap bricks and what that should mean to you, because I have seen reports in Minnesota and Wisconsin and Nebraska, the Japanese beetle attack, and people spray, and it just seems like it's like a waterfall of bugs coming at you, and they still can't stay ahead of the game. So I'll go that in more detail. This thing, if you want to propagate anything for fermentation, at least 70 degrees, and you're going to get a better response and more predictable in about 3 or 4 days if you put it 80 degrees. Put your probe inside, and usually it's going to be mostly anaerobic process, not aerobic, and you don't need bubblers or anything like that. So you're making something with lactic acid bacteria, which is a faculty of anaerobe. It will work both with oxygen. Anaerobic or aerobic compost, the so-called hot compost, is made when you have at least 6% dissolved oxygen in your material on these chemicals. You can make it work, but you've got to have vine health. And that's why at the end of that line, there's a handout I'm going to give you that's really important to see. So let's go over here, and I'll show you what we use and when we use it, what time of year.
How long have you been practicing Korean natural farming, and why did you do it?
3 years full time, and I did it because of dicamba, I think. It just wiped us out so bad. In 2021 we got hit, and those trunks came from that, and there wasn't anything alive up here in the spring. And so you're pretty much starting all over with 17 acres of grapes.
Were you organic before that?
Yeah. I'm not registered with the USDA organic because I wanted to, but the winery isn't going to pay you for it, and it's a lot of effort. And so I'm satisfied. I don't need to prove anything to anybody. I'm just satisfied. You get on a sprayer, and you know you got a 5-mile-an-hour wind if you're lucky. And you come to the end of the row, you shut it off, and you turn. And if you turn your face, you're going to get a nice mist. And I'm thinking that used to be Zeram or Captan or double nickel or all the stuff they used to use. And I'm thinking, you know, there's a lot of Parkinson's disease going around for people mishandling some of the products available. So this we collect leaves in the fall with this little thing, and you'll have to come follow me. And that I use in my Johnson 2 compost pile as a brown. And I cut some fresh grass as a green, and I don't have manure this year, but you can make out of wood chips or anything really. And then this is the start to go.
It's on. It's recording.
Motor crimper.
We can.
You wouldn't know it.
I'll delete it later.
This spring we had a lot of rain, and we had grass and cover crop that high. It was just beautiful. And it happens when you get rain. So I don't mow until harvest, typically. This thing goes down the row, and I make a double pass up and back, and just keep going around the circle. And when you're done there, you go over here and you go over there, and you know. So this roller crimper, it's got a plug in it. You can see right here. You fill that with water, and so it weights it down, and it takes a big long stem like that, lays it down, and you can go boom, boom, boom. It crimps each point. It kills it. The roots are still alive, and it'll come back, but lays a mat that thick, not kid, on the ground. Spectacular out here. And then I have to get the weeds in the row, and I have a string mower up there that was actually manufactured, designed in Italy, and it's like a huge weed whacker. So it's got a broom about that long. It's got a bunch of strings on it, nylon, and it just goes around and it knocks the weeds back. And usually I just have to do that once, and that takes care of it. Then before harvest I mow and blow with that grasshopper. So I cut everything in that width and blow it as a ribbon right on the vine row. And you do it both sides, and it really looks pretty damn nice. You know, and you dig underneath there when there's enough moisture, you'll find worms. It makes you happy.
Yep.
And here's my wire and 410 post. One of the worst things about living in the vineyard 20, 25 years after you've got everything started is you find out your post is starting to rot big time. And you'll see a number of posts down here. Ben Bremsors, a lot of these nowadays, southern yellow pine is treated, but they're just not worth the money. This is a little bit more, actually, these are the same price now as purchased post that's been treated. And so I don't think you can have the whole vineyard that way around here, but I can put these in by hand, or I've got a big post pounder that I'll probably use. But there's a couple hundred in here. This is a fall project, and this is my stacker. I have 10 acres, 15 acres of brome over there, and I still use something like this. I put an adapter on for use on tractor, but then I pick the loose hay up and I make, you probably didn't see it, but on your way out, if you look to the right after you get to the gate, you see a big long ribbon, there's a couple down there. That's compost built up, and I'm gonna inoculate it with some of my indigenous microorganisms now this fall, and I've got a couple of other piles. Key about compost, to keep the microbes happy, they gotta have moisture. And I don't put plastic over top, I put straw, I put hay, well it's about that thick actually, it beats down, but it dries out and it's no good. The microbes go senescent, they don't die. Nematodes will make a cyst. No, that's the protozoa. They make little round eggs, and the nematodes make eggs. Protozoa make, I forget the name of that right now, but you can see them in a microscope. And so they're dormant. They'll come back to life when conditions are right. Nature's very, very resilient. I tell you that, it's amazing. So if you look down the row, this is just recovering most of the stuff from near-death experience. My general is I have wires that go up to the top, only about 30 inches. And because this is the first year, I just let everything climb up. But you let some of the vine, the canes come out to the side, and some grow up the vine. I did not place anything here. That's just the way they grew. And when you get more vine density, more cane density, each bud you leave is going to give you a cane for next year. And that cane's going to have 2 clusters on it, sometimes 3 in Brianna. And so the net is that you can increase your density and get more tons per acre and reduce your vigor. If you let these things grow in this condition and the vines catch up, they're going to have canes that go up to the top wire and come right down and go clear down to the ground. That's what they do when they don't have a balance of growth, heart and crop, and density of canes. And that's something you just learn. Every variety is different. And these are nearing the end of the line this year. And it looks like we're going to have pretty good weather, so we could have probably carried them longer. But I purposely did not water. They've got deep roots anyway. But I wanted to see what is the outcome of Korean natural farming. And they seem like this year they went in senescence a lot sooner than I'm used to seeing. But I'm not worried about it because they have to stop photosynthesizing sometime, and it just well be 1st of October is any. So any questions about
How old are these?
Well, they were planted in 2005.
Okay. They're almost 20-year-old vines.
Yeah.
Okay.
2004. Frontenac was planted in probably 1999. But they all kind of look the same because they almost all of them died. You can see there's one right there. The first one, it survived somehow. And you can see some of what I did there to keep something coming up, and there's some replant. These generally came back from the ground, but in 2022, there was no trunks to speak of above the ground. I had to cut them all down with a chainsaw.
Is this the Frontenac grape?
Yeah, this one is, yeah.
They all been cut back and then
Grow back.
Yeah.
And I thought they were done for because you had all those trunks split. But
I was so happy to see that. That must be
you had the same thing where,
St. Pepin and lacrosse.
yeah,
She's got
yeah. We had them once upon a time here.
We're figuring it out.
They're hardy.
You don't have any yet?
Yep, Frontenac.
But that's just the difference in variety.
Yeah, we have a mixed
There, we kind of think we're the ones doing something wrong when we lose vines, like Vineyard get them. But yeah,
So when do you stop water?
Pruning is all part of it.
Make your life
right.
easier, don't be like
Probably be one more time. I like to keep them flush with water going into the wind. Yeah. Well, not in a year like
we
this.
have white St. Pepin across.
Yeah. Now what, it makes a lot of difference when you come out in the spring, you know, you can lay these down. This is the elbow to fist method that were taught by all the extension services. It's kind of new on the scene. And this would have been a good one to replace, except it got bent here. But elbow to fist, you lay a cane down and you got something like this. You'd put your, you want to know where to cut it off. If you're going to put a cordon on, just do that, something like that. Basically for these varieties, it's about 6 or 7 nodes. We call them buds, but they're actually nodes. And if you do that, and then every one of these, you can see this is a 2-node spur. You'll cut this one off, and the official method is you cut it right here. You always leave a stub, and you leave 2 nodes right here, but you never cut it right here, you cut it out here. You leave a stub. So it means you always have a stub you're going to be cutting off. And it seems like it's double work, but it's double the trouble if you don't do it right, because you're going to get grapevine trunk disease. And I have seen my life share of that. I finally went to Italy and learned from Simonite and Cirque how to do this properly. They've got vines that are old as hills, but of course they don't deal with the weather that we do. And that's exactly what they teach. They have a school on that. I bought their book, I took some seminars from them, and they did a class with tests, and I took all that too. And you got to change your habits, but about the 3rd day into it, your habits have changed, you know, because I used to cut this off right flush here, and I'd cut this off right there, right at the node. And what happens is it has to desiccate, dry back, and it dries back into the vascular zone that's going to feed this node, this bud, if you want to call it. And that's why they do it that way. And these, you know, the spurs along here are fine, but the trunk is the one. Now this one didn't do very well, so I'll have to replace it with this. And I'll probably leave 2 here. And it's really, for me, it's quite interesting because it's young and you're really starting all over again. You really get a good chance to, like raising your kids again.
Well, who does this cutting? I mean, you have to do this with every one of these plants?
Oh yeah, me, just me.
You're kidding.
That's when it's really cold out, right?
Well, podcasts are just wonderful. Yeah, if you see this, these are phylloxera on the tip. It's interesting, I did a plant sap analysis, and I'll go into more detail, but phylloxera are a sucking insect. That's the one that devastated the French, the European vines, the vinifera, because the vinifera have no resistance to that. These things are everywhere. I guarantee you put a vine anywhere in the United States, and within 2 or 3 years, you're going to have phylloxera problems. Now, it was interesting. I did a plant sap just with a vice grip when it was, you know, in May, when they were about this long, and I had 11 bricks. And I thought, well, that's pretty good. That's what I want on the plant sap. And then I didn't do anything more because it started drying up. It was really hard to get juice out of a grape leaf. And so sure enough, I sent this in for sap analysis, and these things had this phylloxera. Oh, there isn't one on this one, but they were, when these were in senescence, there was very prevalently, the top layer had all of this phylloxera on it. It's a little knob. The bug bites the leaf, and it creates its own protection, and it lays the eggs in there, that swelling, and then they're protected. You can't spray them, then they're never going to get hit by the spray. You have to protect by having a plant that has bricks at least 12, if not 14, but for sucking insects, anything over 8 bricks. Well, it turns out these bricks up here, because I have to take old leaf, new leaf to send in for sampling, they were about 7 or 6.5 bricks. Just perfect environment. Certain bugs can only digest food at a certain bricks level. It's too much sugar. They love sugar, but they can't take it in their diet if it's part of the plant food they're eating. So it's pretty fascinating. I'll show you more detail of this. So any questions about this in general?
Do you know of anybody running sheep or chickens down their rows?
Yeah, they do. Chickens for sure, and sheep if you modify your cordon so that this trunk goes up to about here, and so they're much higher, and they have a sprawled layout like that. And if you let grapevines do what they want to do, but give them support, you can see here, I didn't do any of this training. They just went up, and they stayed up. And if you put them up high enough, then the goats and the sheep can't get up to eat it, and they'll leave it alone. And they're really good if you could integrate them, but you got to train them. There's other methods too, people, but you really got to want it if you don't do the system right, you don't have your training right.
Do you have to be concerned about this kind of this stuff?
No, no, they sap the plant of juice, so what happens is this much the plant does not photosynthesize.
Okay.
And you're missing out on some feedback to the soil, to the microbes, and you'd rather not have them. But interestingly, a couple of years ago, I did a plant sap test early and later, and the Brix was 12 early on, 11 later, and I had almost no phylloxera. So I thought, boy, this Korean natural farming is pretty damn good. I got rid of phylloxera. I had no idea about what Brix, plant sap Brix level, that's on the sugar and dissolved solids, what that has. Now, Thomas Dykstra, a doctor out of, entomologist out of Florida, he has, I got in the handout, you guys owe it to yourself to listen to what he's got to say. My whole mission in this vineyard is, don't spend your money on purchased crap, even if it's organic. Make it yourself, what you can, and get a sap analysis so you know what minerals the plant's taking up. But you got to rely on your microbes. And so I'm going to double the density of my emitters and inject whatever I need to, but the injection is going to be Korean natural farming products. And increase your Brix in your plant. What do you do if you have an attack of Japanese beetles? You're going to try to spray your way out of that? Good luck. They are voracious eaters, and they're at the higher end of the Brix stamp. Feed the plant that make it become very super healthy, which he defines, get your plant sap Brix about 12 degrees Brix, and if you want to be safe, do 14. Because every day I've measured and I've cross-verified this. This is 2 degree Brix change every day is pretty common in grapes. And I've tested clover. We have a lot of clover in this vineyard, and it's always healthy stuff. It looks healthy. It looks beautiful green. And this stuff, you didn't see it when you saw it when they had grapes clusters on these things. That's just the most beautiful sight you ever saw in your life. All these bronze in that grape color. It's just spectacular. But it's just beginning, you know. Every place you see a cane, you're going to have 2 of them in this place next year. So production is going to increase. It's 2 years away from getting back to where I was in 2018. That's the journey. Let's, the bathroom's right here if you want to. Let's just walk down here real quick like I said. That's to cover we have to cover all the vines every year as soon as veraison starts. And if you have any of that black nylon, oh my God, that stuff will tear off your fingernails. It's just terrible. And so this stuff is good to work with. You still need gloves. But this goes over every row, and I drive, and Muriel's on the other side, pulling, and we pull it out by hand. Taking it up, I usually, a day beforehand, take it up. Now, 15, 20 years ago, if you were trying to raise grapes, you didn't put net on, you could not, you had to get in there almost before, just as veraison was going to begin. Veraison on grapes is where the grape change from green to their natural ripe colors, and they do that. They were like golden nuggets. They were just, I've never seen anything like that. I got to tell you, even it was dry, of course, so you're not going to have the fungal problems. that you'd worry about in if you lived out in Missouri or Pennsylvania. But I've never been able to carry grapes that long and in pristine shape. And we were just cutting and throwing. There's nothing wrong with them. And we've had years when we were using fungicides, Captan and Zeram and that. You could go out here and a week before harvest, all of a sudden, every cluster would have one berry that had brown rot on it. And it's acetic acid kind of will evolve to that, and it makes the wine taste like vinegar. Wineries hate that stuff. So that happened 2 years in a row. And I used oxidate the second year, which is organic approved disinfectant, and that really helped. It prevented it from getting too bad, but still, that's part of the problem of dealing with this stuff, and that's why carrying grapes beyond their ripening stage is pretty tough to do most years, but this year everything was just fine.
Do you ever get Asian lady beetles coming in late?
Yeah, we used to have that big time problem. You couldn't even hardly pick the Frontenac, yeah. And I don't know
Not so much
what's
anymore.
changed. We just haven't had a major attack. Have you guys had them?
They seem to be tied to soybean aphids.
Yeah, yeah. Beyond those trees, land. Yeah. Let's go back this way. I don't know, what time is it, everybody?
10 after 11.
10 after 11. Oh, good. We got plenty of time. Don't make a mistake of buying short net if you're going to do that and thinking you're going to be able to tie underneath. And don't cut them to length. Just spool it around and go to the next row until you run out. This stuff is just as good as you get. Now I have to repair the nets every year, but I've taken care of a lot of the problems, so I had very few tears this year. But I've got the fisherman net spool, that needle, that wide thing they use, and you get pretty good at it. But it keeps the birds out. The thing is about net, when you put it on, the birds seem to leave you alone. And a week later you think, why the hell did I take all that effort to put the net on? There's no birds around. They seem to leave you. Not worth, not effective. So I just bought 20-foot long rebars and cut them to length. And so have a seat.
Now this tool here, you say it's just for weeds?
Only just last couple weeks.
Okay, after you pick the grapes.
Once you get a look at this compost I use for starter, it's got all sorts of fungi in it. This is the compost I use.
Pretty.
There's two of them, one from two different piles. Morgan.
Right about 11:15 too.
Okay, all right, good, thank you. This is the compost that goes into making the extract.
Nice.
And you make
It's got all sorts of biology in it.
Yeah, it sure does. What do you feed your worms?
I actually have failed so many times at vermicomposting that I just buy vermicompost.
About 2 years ago. So we were out in New York.
Nice.
Yeah, it's two of these. So the thing is about this compost, you don't know what you have unless you have a microscope to see what's in there. And it's a pretty simple method. But I put water in here, stir it with this paint sprayer, paint stirrer, put it in here, wet it down in that little pup tank down there, and then I put all my other amendments in there, stir it around, circulate it for a minute or two, get it, and then I put it in my spray tank. And this is part of what goes in there. This is the sea salt, one of the core ingredients. You can pass that around. One of the core ingredients in Korean natural farming. I really should just be calling it natural farming, but well, it's got, pick a number, 83 or 94 trace elements in it, and it's kind of like this trust but verify system in life. I was in the Army, so you don't volunteer for anything. What you find out is how much of the minerals are being actually taken up by the plant. That is directly a pseudo method of what plant bricks tells you. If you've got a very healthy plant, it means it's got all of its macronutrients balanced, the NPKs and those calciums, potassiums, magnesium, and then it's got all the trace element needs. It does need some. And I found out this year, and I'll go over a little bit with that, after all Korean natural farming for 3 years, of course, this is all starting from scratch, so long term, who knows? You're about microbial life in the soil. What's going down in that soil that is not there? And I thought, if I leave this like this, and that's more natural, I mowed here because we harvested here, but you see that right there? That's post-harvest, no further action. So I don't mow, I'm not intending to mow. Now we have bees and bumblebees and every kind of moth. We used to have a whole cascade of monarch butterflies every year about August. You'd drive in the morning out here along that row and they'd come down off of those trees, oak trees and ash trees, just by like a waterfall. It was really a beautiful sight. They'd hang around here for about a month because, again, I don't mow. And when I do mow, I'd mow this first and that second and that third. And so there's a lot of it just doesn't get mowed. And so they have a chance to recover, and that means the monarchs and all the yellow and the white butterflies, they get a chance to eat, and the bees and such. And it's pretty important to me. And
if I don't mow, I'm going to have 4 foot, 5 foot grass.
Well, yeah, you know, you have to, well, I roll or crimp, you see. You'd call that mowing. I knock it down. Yeah, but then.
We have schematics for how to build one on our website if you.
Yeah.
Okay.
For really cheap.
Yeah.
I'd be interested in that.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can go, bat out of hell, you can go 8 miles an hour if you want, if you're that good a driver down a road with wooden posts in place. But almost like it's faster the better. But it crimps it down. I have some grasses over here I have to go on twice. But everything about roller crimping, you have to understand, you don't catch it at the right time, it's going to pop right back up on you the next day. It's got to be at flowering stage. Now, what I like about it, we have vetch out here, and usually that vetch gets, you know, just rank, and it knocks that down and kills it right now. Now, the bumblebees don't like me much for that, but all the white clover and the Alsite clover and the giant red clover and a couple other clovers we have out here, they're just fine. They might be in flower even, but they never get crimped down. So when, in a couple of days after the carnage is done, all of a sudden you got this beautiful carpet, and everybody just loves it. But when I mow not, that's my mowing, that rimper. Then just before harvest, before I put the nets down, I have to mow a strip. And I always try to leave a little strip in the middle for the beneficials, some place to reside, so you're not taking everything away from them. But then, of course, there's always in the vine row. I can tell you, when we harvest grapes, when you put bins here and you put the cover over the plastic, and if you let them sit out for a little bit, you're going to see 100 green spiders crawling on the surface of the plastic. They're inside the clusters. And I don't know what they live on because I don't see that many bugs, but they're there. That's their home, apparently. And so they go to the winery, and I tell them, no charge extra for the spiders. I'm not sure what they do with them. I suppose they just go in the crusher. So when you get done like this, I do have a string mower, and some years in a wet year I got to use it twice, most time just once. And even with this moisture, the grasses and whatnot, I actually have a blend that's probably too much clover, not enough grasses, just for microbial balance in life. And so I thought, before I got my microscope, if I leave it like this, you would have a pretty good microbial buildup because you're not killing everything. That's what everybody does. I made this as a joke, but bug in a jug, that's what people buy nowadays, you know, the last few years. And of course, what this might have in it is 5 or 10 different species of a specific type of bacteria, and usually no fungi, because fungi have to be incorporated in the soil, not the saprophytic kind. That's the kind when you pick up a log and it's got that white filaments. That's a saprophytic fungi, and they're what break down most of everything you see in Mother Nature. The real ones that you want are the mycorrhizal fungi that reside in the soil and attach to the vine roots, and they go out and mine, and they can have a lot of network. The miners of your soil in the microbial world are bacteria, who eat the minerals, and fungi, the mycorrhizal fungi. Now you also have protozoa, flagellates and amoeba and ciliates, and they're all there to eat the bacteria. That's what their job is. And if you get that working well and you have a good ciliate or protozoa population, your crops are going to explode because bacteria go out and mine the soil. The difference is you either have dirt or you have soil. Dirt is sand, silt, and clay. And it could be moist, doesn't matter. It's just sand, silt, and clay. Soil is sand, silt, and clay plus organic matter plus microbial life. And microbial life cannot survive without plants. So I don't know if you say that plant is more important than microbes. Microbes can't live without plants, but on the other hand, plants seem to be able to get by without microbial life. Just talk to any NPK synthetic farmer, he'll tell you that that's what he feeds his plants all year long, is he puts out a big load of all these these NPK synthetics, and that's what feed the plant. When you do that to a plant, they don't give any exudates back to the roots and back to the microbial life, because they're just fine and dandy with all the synthetic salt-based fertilizer. They put salt in the fertilizer to keep it from blowing up, quite frankly. And salts, to a certain degree, help electroconductivity work, and that's kind of like a carburetor, feeds everything to the plant as a sign of activity. But too many salts and you get way over 1,000 units, and that can be too much. You need a lot at times, but not that kind. So we don't use any synthetic products anywhere here. These are all organic trace elements, and I put them on because we found out in our sap analysis that we were low on boron, not so much in iron, but copper and zinc. And so you can buy minerals. They're $20 to $30 a gallon, something like that. Now, in natural farming, everything is put on in homeopathic levels. And homeopathic in this case means I'm going to dilute anything I have either 1 to 1,000 or 1 to 500. And that fertilizer over here, made from dandelions, that might be 1 to 200. And I can inject that through the lines, through the irrigation lines, or just spray it on. But my experience, I did this 3 years in a row before I finally decided to stop beating my head against the wall. If you spray something out, compost tea, I used to make multiple batches of 500-gallon tea, and you get your sprayer out and you get large droplets so you can spray in any weather. But if it doesn't rain, that's just a waste of time, because this stuff has to be in the soil, and it can't just get there on its own. I can tell you a story. When I took the soil food web course, I've said this other times before, but Elaine Ingham is nothing if not tenacious about proving that microbial life works. And she and her husband did a paper on health of microbial life in plants And what happens if you change the protozoa level? So that's the flagellates and amoeba and the ciliates. They're the ones that eat the bacteria. And the bacteria will be hundreds to one of them, but they eat thousands a day, you know. And the reason why that's important is the bacteria are the ones out mining, and the euphemism that's stated, I don't know how you prove it, is that the plant sends the plant sap, the carbohydrates that it makes from photosynthesis, down around the plant to the clusters, in our case, to the growing tips, and down the phloem, that's the outer part just below the bark, down into the roots. And a lot of variation in how much gets down there. But rhizophagy, a new term for me from a couple of years ago now, and there's a reference in that note I'll hand to you, that explains how a plant interacts and uses its sap down below to invite bacteria, which is the principal miner of minerals in the soil. And that's what you're after. You want to find something that's healthy, it's got a balance of the right kind of minerals in balance with everything else. You'll see this Mulder chart, this round circle, and it's got all the cations and anions and all the trace minerals, and they got a line going here and here and here. And I've studied that. I don't know how people make any sense of it. Because they're saying, like the Albrecht method, if you overdo one thing, it causes chain reaction for two other elements, and it's imbalanced, and you got an unhealthy plant. And as Dr. Thomas Dijkstra explains, you get that balance right, and Elaine Ingham in the Soil Food Network says, rely on your microbes. That's where your health comes from. You don't need sprays. I mean, I think I could spray just before bloom and after bloom and just at veraison, and that's all the sprays I would need with Korean natural farming. And yet I'm still on this habit. I try to spray every 2 weeks or so because I want to get some of these units out there, the oriental herbal nutrients and the fermented plant juice and that. And it's really amazing to me how you gotta change your mindset, and that's hard to do. Even though I've been doing this for 10 or 12 years now, not with Korean natural farming, but certainly organic practices. So we'll go into this. This is how you make lactic acid bacteria. This is one of the most important ones that you can make yourself. This is rice I put in here this morning. Put this much water in it. Shake it up like that. Now, if you're like my wife, she'll take the rice out and cook it for dinner, and I get left with the water. That contains some of the bacteria that were in here, the lactobacillus, and then it will, if you put it on in a shelf and let it ferment, that's all you do is you take this liquid, take this lid off, put a cloth over it, and it will collect lactic acid bacteria that's in the air, so you can leave it someplace, but it's got to be shelf warm, 70 degrees in the house, and it ferments and it gets a little bit of a sour smell. Then when you're done with that, you get milk. You can go down to the grocery store and buy whole fat milk, regular milk. I buy 10 gallons of raw milk from the colony. Just go over buckets and fill it up. And you put this in with your raw milk, and you let it ferment for 5-7 days. And then I double that with adding equal amounts of water and molasses, and I put it in a tank like this. Now here's one of my tanks is made from basmati white rice and milk, 3-gallon raw milk, April 9th, 2024. That's when I made this. And this is alive even yet. Yesterday this thing was puffed up like that because I choose to keep it in the basement, but you can smell it. Just pass this around. That's lactic acid bacteria made in our home. And that's, huh?
How long does the water sit in the rice?
It doesn't have to sit at all. You just rinse it off. You get that white liquid. I happen to ferment with the rice in place. I just don't tell Muriel about it. You can use brown rice, would be better because it's organic. I used basmati rice, I used black rice, which really didn't turn out very well. It wasn't very active. And then here's another one. I'll pass this around. This is fermented plant juice. I took the growing tips of plants. You have all the plant hormones are in the growing tips, most of them anyway, and the ones you want. So this is a biostimulant. This has all the auxins that are at the tip, and cytokinins and riboflavins and all the, there's another couple I'm missing, and there's some gas in it. But this is made from a couple of different plants, just growing in our place. I didn't filter it much, but it smells like something you could drink, I swear. But this is fermented plant juice. That's a biostimulant. That's what you use that for. And this is Oriental Herbal Nutrient. This has got 2 parts. You take these types of, I purchased these herbs from Mountain Rose Herbs, but any source will do. They're organic. And you ferment these about this much, really, in a gallon jar with sugar for about a week. And then you put in, I mean, some recipes call for beer, but I use to continue to ferment. But then you put in just vodka, cheap vodka. It doesn't have to be high-grade stuff, or Everclear. And this is only about 40% alcohol. And the best extraction for all the magic elements in these herbs is about 70% alcohol. So you have to buy Everclear or something like that. But
What's the alcohol for?
the alcohol is what is a tincture. It's what. Try not to spill this. I've got more, but let me take the lid off. But it's 2 parts angelica, and then 1 part licorice, cinnamon, garlic, and ginger. And you kind of crush them up a little bit and shake that up. That's a biostimulant. That's what I have seen. This, as I can verify, is an absolute observation, is that you get bull cane growth, strong growth on plants that don't look like they should be doing that, from my experience on the varieties that we have. But yet, they just go to town. You get unbelievable growth. You want to pass them around. You get unbelievable growth when you put that stuff on, because it's made from these herbs that have some power, like biodynamics. If you're familiar with that, there's that May Bruce out of England developed the QR composting method using the biodynamic preps without the biodynamic process. And it's a way to process amazingly well compost in very short order. And I'm not going to pass this around, but this is what the OHN for garlic is. And I make these in gallon jugs. So I've got 6 1-gallon jugs of the angelica, 2 of them, and 1 ginger, 1 garlic, 1 licorice, and 1 cinnamon. And I blend these together in let's say for a month's supply, and away you go. That's where's my lids? Here they are. I just love the smell of some of these, but mostly I just like the way it works. I can see that when you don't have all these other distractions, these things seem to make sense to me. And then here's the beginning of it all. Now this time of year apparently isn't as good as it should be, because I have started it. This is your it needed to ripen. I thought I was going to be okay putting it out on Monday and Tuesday, but I needed a little bit more time. This is the indigenous microorganisms. That's just cooked rice, and usually the one I collected earlier this year, it had a pile of fuzz in there that long. It was just spectacular. And you take this in IMO, it's called indigenous microorganisms, and this is just ripening, so in a couple of days this will be really fuzzy. And then you take it out, weigh it, rice and all, and you put in an equal amount of sugar, and you put it up, and that's then called IMO 2. Okay, and what happens when it gets all that white fuzz on it, it turns yellow. The rice turns yellow, just the most amazing thing. And I had hoped to have a better example for you, but that's as good as I'm going to be able to do today. To show you, you can use these kind of containers. You can use clay pots. You can just about use anything. And you can see here's the beginning of that white fuzz. Some people actually just take some saprophytic fungi, the things, and actually stick it inside in the rice. And fungi or bacteria is so good that it just gets in. You can't keep it out. So you can make it out of wooden boxes, basket weaving boxes, things, baskets. You can make it out of just about anything. It's amazing. I use organic sugar instead of brown sugar because I can buy that. It's less than $1 a pound. And at one time I thought, I don't know if I want to spend all that money on buying sugar at $1 a pound, but what you find out is when you make this stuff and you have your IMO 3 or your IMO 2, which is when you add sugar to your first collection, when you want to make a 5-gallon bucket or something, you grab about that much of a dollop and plop it in your bucket along with your the core recipe, the base recipe, and that's all you need. So you don't. I have enough for 2 years supply right now. I don't actually need these things, but remember, you can, if you're living in a city lot, probably a little bit tougher, but you might know somebody on a farm near you, or if you're on a farm, just pick an undisturbed spot. And I think the reason why these didn't go to town is because it's been so dry. When I picked the earlier bunch in May, it was wet out, and all I do is I preset these places up. I put a pile of hay. So I just lift it up and stick it underneath there and come back 4 or 5 days later and pick it up, and whoa, here's this big pile of mold and white. I call it mold, but it's really biology. And you just blend that with equal amounts of sugar, put it in a jar, keep it 55 degrees in the basement or in the fridge, and maybe even be better. And there you can make, I've got IMO 3 over there. It isn't ready yet because I didn't start soon enough, but it becomes a big mass, and that is from, I buy 50-pound bags of wheat bran, rice bran. You can use whole oats, wheat, just about anything. The microbes will eat it. And they need food, so you put a little molasses with this stuff, and then they go to town, then you dry it out, and then that's what to make IMO 4, got those compost piles over there, that's going to go in there and inoculate that. Even though they should have everything in there, I'm pretty damn certain out here in these vineyard rows, they don't have everything that these guys collected because I collected them in ideal spots, but they're indigenous to this area. What do you suppose this bug in a jug thing was made with? Somewhere in Illinois with 8 local species of bacteria and maybe some fungi in there. But are they going to live here? Or maybe it was made in Florida. I mean, you just don't know. Maybe made in China, you know. But I don't know what they have for species in China or Florida. But I know damn well it's not the same thing as what we have right here in our own vineyard. And so that's the beauty of this, is it kind of opens your eyes up. And now I got to get it peddled, because I found that in these rows, when I took samples and put them under a microscope, they aren't as rich as I was hoping they would be. So I did a plant sap analysis, and I want to get these back, but I'll show you the front, and I agree. Maybe you guys can split one here. I didn't make enough copies of this. We might, in fact, I'll probably give you some of Gree and some of Brianna, because it tells you the same kind of story. And this is what they look like. This happens to be New Age, and it was it's just a old leaf, new leaf. So I take something, a leaf like 50 leaves from the tips, growing tip, and then one of the basal by the cluster, and it shows you what's going down. So I got to get these back. But this shows you the state of the vine, and it's where I discovered, if you find, I don't know if I kept some for myself, but you'll find that, look at the plant sap, bricks, old leaf, new leaf. If you have Frontenac Gree, somebody who has Frontenac Gree, shout out what the bricks of the old leaf and the new leaf are. Morgan, what does it say?
The new one is 7 and the old one is 8.9.
Yeah. So 7 is right in the area where sucking insects have a chance to survive, and 8 or 8.9 and 9, they're going to leave. And when I measured the Frontenac Gree plant sap in May, it was 10.2 bricks. So I felt pretty happy about that. But they degraded because we stopped getting rains. And I think what happened is the microbes stopped giving their feedback to the roots. And probably the photosynthesis even had less exudates to the roots anyway because of the lack of water. And that's why I'm doubling. I finally decided this year, this pretty well proved it. Brianna, who has Brianna? What is the plant sap bricks, the old and the new, show up there?
The bricks is, I just know it's right here for you. It's 8.8. Yep.
Yeah, okay. So that's just above the area where phylloxera or sucking insect is going to want to stay home. Well, guess what happened? There was not very much damage from phylloxera over here, and there was extreme damage on here in Frontenac, and all because I didn't keep, I think, enough water to the vine to keep the microbial life active to make that plant more healthy than that. Now in 2021, I had recorded 12.2 bricks, and the next year 10.5. And so I thought I was on a pretty good trajectory, even though some of these were pretty dry years. And I only did the one test in the spring, and this is in the fall, and so it could be that the spring readings are better. But guess what? I didn't have any phylloxera attack. And I had put out, what do they call them? It's Beauveria bassiana. It's expensive, but it's an infectious microbe that will attack and eat the fungal network that's on these plants, and eat bugs, and it will take care of phylloxera. And I put that down one year after I had another year like this, and it really did a good job. But again, you can get that. That's in nature, and you just have to have it corralled with your IMO1 that way. Now let me tell you something about microbes. I started telling you about Elaine Ingham. She was a professor at Colorado State University, and they decided they had had enough about all this naysaying about the effectiveness of microbiology. So they made a BioComplete compost tea, and they had a big center pivot, and you've seen these from the airplane flying over Colorado, these big pivot circles. I don't know if they cover a mile in total, but so they started out and they did 36 hours of spraying, of irrigation. And in all those sectors, they kept injecting compost tea. It was good, rich compost tea. So start out at like 6 o'clock in the morning, go all the way to the next morning, and all the way till like 3 o'clock the next day. So in other words, they put down the microbiology, injected into the irrigation pivot during morning, heat of day, evening, next morning, heat of day again. And then she had a whole bunch of volunteers, So these were graduate assistants, so I don't think volunteer would be the right word to use for them, but they were pressed in serves to help. So everybody had to go out and collect 10 samples of leaves in their sector, and I don't know how many people she had. But she brought them back to the lab and tested them for what biology is on this leaf. So she knew that this sector was sprayed at 6 in the morning, that sector was at 3 in the afternoon, and so on. And she found there is no difference on biology cover on, probably it was corn or soybeans, I don't remember the details. No difference at all, no matter what time it was sprayed. And I know every one of you probably say the same thing I was thinking when I first got into soil food web courses. You can spray between 11 o'clock and 4 o'clock because the ultraviolet rays are going to kill off the bugs that if you're spraying biology. And so I used to do that, but you know, the wind is what it is, and you have a little grace on wind in the afternoon typically, but not always. And so I decided after I saw that, well, then why do I not start at 8 o'clock in the morning and 6 hours later I'm done? So what if it's the heat of the day? Well, she explains that all this biology has glomalin, has a protective coating on it. The protective coating protects these good microbes that you're going to raise and put in your compost tea or make extract. They have a protective coating on them. They are not affected. They'll stand 100-degree heat, no problem at all, because they want to live in that range, 120 degrees and lower, and they're active pretty good above 70. The difference is, this was a big revelation for me. What are the diseases you're going to deal with? Almost anything, vegetables or grapes, but I can tell you it's downy mildew. If you get an attack of downy mildew, in a week those leaves are gone. You're going to grow back, you're not going to kill the vine. Powdery mildew, that white mass that gets on them, botrytis cinerea, and anything that you would grow on vegetables, but those are the principal ones on grapes. Worry about, there's another big one I can't think of. But they'll really devastate you. And what I found out in talking to a scientist who, Václav Pavla, who grew up in Eastern Bloc in Germany, no, it was Czechoslovakia, anyway, the Iron Curtain. And the Russian, when Russia became USSR, they did not allow innovation in their technology, so they did not develop the NPK and the chemical warfare industry to develop. And so they had to rely on biological means to solve these problems. And he knew, this Václav Pavla, that you gotta have vine health. And you get that by having good microbes and feeding them the good kind of food. And he said that all this powdery mildew, downy mildew, botrytis cinerea, and those kind of things, he said, they're opportunist bugs, and they have one mission. They get in a certain range of moisture and density of growth, which is really bad on vines. If you let it get too thick, you're going to get in problems. But you get these things to grow, and it won't be long. And University of Idaho and the University of California all did tests. Did you know that if it gets above 90 degrees ambient temperature for more than 3 or 4 hours, all those fungi die? They don't sporulate, they die. Now they're going to come back in on the wind and all that jazz, but this is the truth, they die. They have proven this stuff. And we don't have too many days this year above 90, but we have had a few here. And wherever you live, I don't know, but we had actually kind of a cool year this year. But to me, it's great solace to know that Mother Nature and heat will take care of that. And it shows you how fragile these devastating diseases can be and how fruitless it is to keep spraying fungicides on it. And the best part is what Dr. Thomas Dijkstra says, and I'll show you that shortly. He's saying you don't need to, because you've got to have plant health. Every time you spray a fungicide or an insecticide or a herbicide, the plant bricks lowers. And what's that going to do? It's going to invite a new class of pest or a lower class of pests than what you had going on you now. And if you get above 10 bricks, you're pretty much immune from disease. It's never going to attack your plant because it can't. The plant sap's too high. Let me show you, because we're probably just about out of time. This is what I use to collect bricks, plant sap, and measure it. It's about the only thing I can use to work on grapes. Now this you should definitely keep.
Do you want these picked
Yeah.
up and then
Yeah. You can pedal that. Yep, there's 2 of them there.
Yeah, I can. And we're at about 11:50.
Okay, good. Just about right. You're going to get a sheet that has some references that I use that I found very valuable. And this is why God invented winter in the northern hemisphere, to bone up on your YouTube channels and other information. Lots of books in here too. So this Cho, there are not very many books written on this. This was people who took this Master Cho, started training people, farmers in North Korea, how to use Korean natural farming. It isn't anything he invented. It's been around for centuries. If you see some of these farms, they've got 25 of these 55-gallon barrel drums stacked up in a corner, and they've got all these preparations in there. This book is really good. It describes just enough, and it's in your reference here. And then if I were starting from scratch and I had to make one recommendation, this is what I would have you do. It's Jadam, natural organic pest and disease control. This is kind of like for most people, this book right here, because it's simpler than Korean natural farming. I can tell you one of the biggest problems that I've seen getting started is just simply doing it. You can read about it, you can YouTube study it, and then the season comes and you're so busy, and just doing it is so simple. How to collect indigenous microorganisms, how to make lactic acid bacteria. Those are the core of what you need to go into the second level. You start out, you can't buy oriental herbal nutrients, you can't make fermented plant juice the first year because you got to have growing plants, vigorously growing plants. So you make your eyes on that and you do it, but you got to do it, and that seems to be the big. This one is a lot easier to get into it, and it gives you about the same results. It's using indigenous microorganisms, but it's proliferating them with potatoes. I mean, it's just amazing. So let me just go down quickly down this rhizophase cycle. That's a study on how plant roots absorb bacteria, strip them of their minerals, and spit them back out the root hairs. And Cho natural farming, that's your basic manual I just had. Jadam is that's one I would recommend if you're just starting, because there's a lot of support and it's really simple to understand. Spice composting, that's controversial because it's anaerobic digesting of compost piles. Very rapid. And what are you after in compost? Do you want microbial life or do you want nutrients? Have you ever asked yourself that question? What are you getting out of it? For me, it's microbial life. How can anybody, even on this scale, make enough compost to spread 4 tons an acre or whatever your number you choose? It's really hard to do. But you can extract the microbes and let the microbes go into the ground and do the mining for you. You know, the chemical people say, oh, you can't mine the land, you're going to run out of land, you're going to make it dirt poor. Well, if you do a complete assay of your soil mineral life, top 12 inches, you're going to find you got like 270 years worth of potassium and 190 years of phosphorus and so on and so on. Nitrogen, there's how many tons over your head, 7-8% nitrogen. But if you have the right bacteria, they're going to unlock that stuff. But what happens with most time, you get a soil report, what's it say? Available blah, 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 whatever avail. Well, that's what the plant can uptake. That's because of whatever microbes were made that available. Because remember, soil is sand, silt, and clay, plus organic matter where nutrients are stored, and microbial life. And you have all that going, you just need to make it work. Now YouTube, you can read through these, and these, as Chris Trump has wonderful tutorials on how to Korean natural farm. And Bear Mountain Channel does a really good job of explaining, but both Jadam and Korean natural farming, they do a really good job. This guy, I think, was a scientist in his other life, and he does a good job of explaining. And then Jadam Organic Farm and Garden. Now the big thing I want to have you...
I can't stand it anymore.
Oh,
I think he
oh,
he might still
I just about got him. Oh, he's curled up in a ball. Look on the backside. This is really my whole take home. It's a chart that was developed by Dr. Tom Dykstra, and it shows the various levels of Brix in the plant sap. I'm not talking about the fruit, I'm just talking about the plant sap. And you'll notice if you follow along, he says that, and he does a lot of testing around the United States. He said most of the plants in the United States are between 2 and 6 Brix on their plant sap. He said they're mostly unhealthy. The GMOs, that if they make 5 Brix, they're lucky. A lot of times they're 2 or 3. So I attribute this index chart, and you'll have to, I don't expect that you're going to take my word for it. Just believe me, my whole focus right now is I got to do everything I can at every stage of growth from May through the end, like through now, to keep our plant sap high. And it can be done. I've got to figure out a better way. I need to distribute some of this stuff. I found out in our plant sap analysis that I needed these compounds because the biology either couldn't find it in the soil, is either non-existent or not enough of it. A bug in a jug might have 8 different species, and we have thousands in this IMO. So Food Web says, don't worry about identifying every little thing. Really worry about, do you have a good ratio of fungal to bacteria? 1 to 1 is a great place, but I can tell you, almost nobody has that. In a cornfield. You probably have no fungal and have very few bacteria, and you might have a 40 to 1 bacteria to fungal. And that's just not going to be healthy for your plants. They just don't have enough to work with. But if you look at this one, he's saying that if you follow this one, that the plant sap level at which this particular segment of plants, of animals or bugs, will leave the plant. And pesticides will reduce the Brix, and that will make it worse. And he's got anecdotal information up the wazoo. You can't believe how much experience this guy has. But look at your Brix level. So I was at 7 on one and 9 on the other, and I was at 12 at the beginning of the year for Brix, for example, in the sap. But look where the aphid group, that's scale, mealybugs, and aphids. And if you're 6 to 8, and he said, keep in mind, there's a lot of plants, they don't have that much even Brix dissolved solids. I remember when I first started, say in 2000, when I was spraying, I put out NPK and sprayed some urea and this nitrate nitrogen. And I would go through spraying my normal sprays, and I have a wave of whiteflies flying off the vines ahead of me. I'm thinking, what's this all about? What did I do to deserve them? Well, where was I? Maybe on the plant Brix at that time, maybe 3 or 4, because that's what was attacking. Then you have sucking insects such as our phylloxera, stink bugs, thrips, mites, lanternflies, whiteflies. And then the worst are the chewing insects, and I give you Japanese beetle. Do we have them over Vermilion area yet?
Just enough to pick off and stomp.
Yeah, so they're coming, yeah. I haven't seen any around here. How about you guys? Yeah. They're all over. And I don't know how you can even spray your way out of them. And he's saying he has absolute proof. If you can keep your plant sap, now they're tougher, you have to be above 10 and maintain that, and might take a bite, but they can't digest plant matter if it's at that Brix level. It isn't that they don't like sugars, but the mineral combination that's in this plant sap at that stage, that's what they can't digest. They will die if that's the only thing they can eat, and he's proven that too. And he said grasshoppers, katydids, and those kind of animals, they're a little bit tougher. They'll eat you when at even under 12. But he said if you want a safe level, start at 14, because it's going to drop 1 or 2 points at night. Plant sap, boron opens up the stomata, and all those accumulated carbohydrates in the leaf are redistributed. You know, your plant sap might be 12, but these grapes were 27-degree Brix that we picked just a couple weeks ago. And they get that sugar from the photosynthesis that's going on. So the Frontenac was 27.2, and Frontenac Gris was 27 point, yeah, it was 27.2 as well. Now, Brianna never gets that high, is 18. That's his natural physiology level, is 18 Brix, and it's more than ripe at that stage. So in everything. This is a chart. Read, well actually that's the problem. The reason why we haven't heard much about this is Thomas Dykstra is a research scientist, he's a doctor, and he researches for private individuals and private companies who pay him for proprietary information. He does not publish this information. He is allowed to share it in general terms, and you'll find that out when he's been on Advanced and Equal Agriculture, Soil Food Web, and it's to the point where this message has got to get out, but you need to have the tools. I can tell you doing plant sap, good luck trying to use those vice grips. You need something like this to get enough sap. You need 3 drops on the prism, on the refractometer, not much. But at any stage, you can do what you think you need to do. That's the learning curve that I've got to go through yet. Will I be successful if I double the amount of emitters and inject the Korean Natural Farming products and Jadam liquid fertilizer, which I guess we can end here. Let's take a look at what 55 gallons of dandelion looks like. It's probably going to have a little smell, but remember, this was completely full of dandelions. And this is my airlock. Now it's got a little bit of a rotten smell to it. But, so it's that far down, that's where the residue is left over. And this was full. Now this stuff I'll put on the compost piles. I'll inject it when I get that going. But that's what dandelion, that's what it looks like. Picked in April. And a little lactic acid bacteria. It's pure liquid gold, baby. With a little bit of smell, you know, but not too bad. When you use it as you need, and then put the lid back on. I'll get that cleaned up later.
So how long did it take to make that batch?
Well, that's the thing. I checked on it in early July. There's still floating plant matter in there, and the smell was wake the dead kind of smell. And so you have to keep it anaerobic. It's going to off gas, and through this thing right here, just a tube in the bottom. And so here it is, 6 months later or so, and it's ready to go. But you can't do it too soon, and the longer you wait, the more it extracts of what's there. I'm just perplexed. Where does all that plant matter go. I mean, I didn't pack it in like I stamp on it, but I pushed it down, and I had a whole bunch to put in there, and that's what you get a few months later, and that's almost free.
Doesn't matter what kind of plant matter you use.
Nope, just got to get it. Well, it depends what you want out of it. If you want the biostimulant side, the hormones, then you grow the growing tip. You can do thistles, alfalfa, beans, you do anything, grasses. Here you can put anything in, whole plant, doesn't matter. But what you do, the lactic acid bacteria, it extracts all the minerals and all the hormones all the way from the tip. You shake the soil off typically, but all the way down. Now, what I have to do, because I don't just trust this stuff, I got to take a sample of this. I want to have it analyzed. What are its major cation, anion components? I don't think I care so much about, I assume that's quite expensive, but if you don't do that, you can be putting something down you think is really good and you got nothing. It's just wasting your time. So I'll prove that this fall yet. I probably won't even use it this year because I'm not going to set up my injection until and have it ready for next year. But this will keep. It's good shape. I'll let it freeze. You probably shouldn't let it freeze, but practically I don't want to dedicate I can't put it in the basement. I can't handle it. And my wife would surely object, so it's one of those things, you take home is you can do it, you just have to get educated and read up on it. I don't know anybody else in this area that's actually doing this. Maybe some of you are doing parts of it, but I would say this is kind of like a Jadam organic method for this stuff. I would really place emphasis on Jadam. You're still going to get some of those biostimulants, but the biostimulants can be made with fermented plant juice, and that's really simple. And I've got fava beans that I planted, and when they get about that tall, you pull the whole thing out, you take the bean off, you shake all the dirt off, wash it off, and put it in a bucket and put brown sugar with it, let it ferment, and the liquid you get off that it would be fermented plant juice. And it's fava beans, and you can plant that anywhere, anytime, and if you need some. Otherwise you have to wait for the season to advance and get these fast growing tips and cut off about that much from the tip. And you don't need to wait till it's flowering. In fact, you should probably get it before it flowers, but dandelions are, they're just seasonal the way they are. But it works.
Thank you.
Any other questions about anything?